Hey, Wendy. Get it?
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, February 11th, 2019 session, regular session meeting of the Durham County Board of Commissioners. I will now share the public charge. The Board of Commissioners asks its members and citizens to conduct themselves in a respectful, courteous manner, both with the board and fellow citizens. At any time, should any member of the board or any citizen fail to observe this public charge, the chair will ask the offending person to leave the meeting until that individual regains personal control. Should decorum fail to be restored, the chair will recess the meeting until such time that a genuine commitment to the public charge is observed. As a courtesy to others, turn off cell phones, please, during the meeting. And I will now ask that we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Are there any agenda adjustments this evening? Okay. There are no adjustments. We will move on to the announcements. And I'm going to time to print it out myself, so I need to read it from my email. I would like to share a statement on behalf of our board. The Durham County Board of Commissioners strongly condemns the recent ICE actions in the Durham community, which have directly impacted at least 6 families in Durham. In one instance, a young man had just walked out of his apartment on his way to work. In another case, a father was pulled over after dropping one child at school with another child sitting in the car. These actions by ICE do not serve to make the Durham community safe. In fact, they serve to terrorize the immigrant and Latinx community in Durham to the point that it makes our community less safe. There is concern and evidence that the Latinx community in Durham is being disproportionately impacted by criminal activity. Local law enforcement is focused on preventing and stopping gun violence and violent crime in Durham. This work is dependent on the trust between the community and law enforcement. People need to feel they can report crimes and expect local law enforcement, the district attorney's office, and the court system to be responsive to their needs as victims. There is no evidence that undocumented people are making our community unsafe. These are hardworking, family-oriented people providing for their families. Again, the Durham County Board of Commissioners condemns the recent actions of ICE that are creating an environment of fear in our community, leaving children traumatized and families without a family member who is often providing the primary financial support for their families. Finally, the Durham County Board of Commissioners supports Sheriff Clarence F. Burkhead, who has made his position clear that the Durham County Sheriff's Office will not honor ICE detainers, nor will they facilitate the apprehension of persons suspected of being undocumented. I will now continue with our announcements for this evening. The Durham Public Schools Town Hall meeting will take place on February 12th at 7 p.m. and will take place at Neal Middle School, 201 Baptist Road. And everyone is invited to attend. It would be great if you could RSVP at www.dpstownhall.event.com, but I'm sure everyone will be welcome to attend no matter what. The Hayti Heritage Film Festival will take place on Thursday, February 14th through Saturday, February 16th, and it's the 20th anniversary of the Hayti Heritage Film Festival. You can find out more about it and how to purchase tickets at the Hayti Heritage Center website. The Durham Youth Work Program is looking for local employers to host youth interns. This program is now in its 16th year, and we have a goal of growing from serving about 200 youth each summer to serving 1,000 youth over the next 3 years. Our goal for this year is to offer more than 300 paid youth summer internships, but we need the help of local employers to make this a reality. There will be an expo on Saturday, February 23rd at 9 a.m. until noon at the Chesterfield Building, 107 West Main Street. We're really encouraging everyone to try to support this program. It is really vital for the youth in our community. And you can find out more by visiting the city's website. We'll have it on our website. You can also contact Jamie Vaughn at 919-560-4965. Our LEAP program, Low Income Energy Assistance Program, is open right now to all Durham residents until March 31st. Applications can be taken at the Department of Social Services Crisis Lobby 27 at 414 East Main Street, 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. each day. You can call 919-560-8000 to schedule appointment, but you can also just show up. Please bring a photo ID, Social Security card, income verification, and verification of heating source bills for your appointment. Please save the date for Women's Health Awareness 2019. There will be a conference with free health screenings, education sessions, healthy living sessions, health resources on Saturday, April 6th, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Marytown Science Building, 1900 Concord Street, which is at the NCCU campus. This is going to be a terrific all-day free women's wellness conference. If you register before Friday, March 15th, you will be able to receive a free lunch, but if you can still come that day as well, but if you register, you will get a free lunch. You can find out more at www.niehs.nih.gov. It's the National Institute it's the National Institute for Environmental Health and Sciences, an RTP. But again, this information will be on our website. You can also call 984-287-4414. We have a Boys of Color conference coming up, My Brother's Keeper Durham, and North Carolina Central University Male Achievement Center. This will take place on April 13th, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Miller Morgan Auditorium, 1801 Fayetteville Street at the NCCU campus. The theme is Be the Change, the rededication to Black male achievement, another free event aimed for males ages 14 and up. Pre-registration is suggested, but again, I'm sure no one will be turned away. 2019 Golden Leaf Awards nominations are being accepted until this Friday, February 15th. We encourage you to nominate a great project based on design, preservation, curb reveal, stewardship of the natural and built environment. Again, more information will be on our website. We're coming up on the 150th anniversary celebration launch for the anniversary of the City of Durham. The official launch is April 13th. And again, you can find out information at durham150.org. If you haven't signed up for Alert Durham, please go to alertdurham.com. And lastly, we encourage you to get involved. We have 43 active advisory boards. We're always looking for great citizens to help us do the work in Durham County. We could not do it without you. So please check our website. We always have openings on boards and commissions. Any other additional announcements? Anybody? No? I did want to share one announcement that was in our newsletter, which is, and I know Commissioner Carter had highlighted this, that Durham County is proud to be one of the 30 organizations in our region to make the national list of 2019 best workplaces for commuters. And to be on this list, you have to subsidize at least $30 per month for transportation, for transit, for parking cash out, teleworking, bicycle benefits. So we are very proud that Durham County is on that list. There are also a number of other Durham employers on the list that I want to acknowledge. Stewart, which has an office in downtown Durham. I'm looking at this list here. TJ Cog is located in RTP in Durham. North Carolina Central University is on the list, IBM, BASF, Duke University, American Tobacco, the City of Durham, Go Triangle, and the Research Triangle Park Foundation. So,
The US EPA is also.
and the US EPA. So I would say that a majority of the list is made up of Durham employers or Durham government entities. So we are very proud. Okay. Next on our agenda this evening, we have minutes from our January 14th, 2019 meeting.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hill, seconded by Commissioner Carter. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are unanimously approved. Tonight we have a very important resolution to share on behalf of all of the members of our board. I want to commend all of the Durham County staff that have had a hand in this resolution. Our Social Services Director, Social Services staff. We have Rhonda Stevens here, who I know worked very, very hard on this resolution. And Rhonda, would you like to say a few words before I read the resolution out loud?
Just to say thank you on behalf of Ben Rose, our agency director, to look at the shutdown and the impact that food and nutrition could have possibly had on families, and to say that it is an essential service. Thank you for reaching out and for making the decision as our Board of County Commissioners to sign a resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhonda. And I think this resolution comes from the best place and way possible. It came from a community meeting with a lot of stakeholders where it came a collective idea to pass this resolution and reflect all of the concerns and information that came out of that meeting, and to be able to actually make sure that our federal representatives in the federal government, and also our fellow county commissioners participate in this important issue. I will now share the Durham Board of County Commissioners resolution to protect FNS from impact of federal government shutdowns. Whereas local governments are the front line of providing services to citizens through local, state, and federal programs, and whereas county governments rely on the support of federal dollars to deliver critical human service programs to its most vulnerable citizens, and whereas a federal shutdown potentially threatens the flow of critical federal dollars to major human service programs that serve families, individuals, the disabled, and seniors. And whereas these critical services include an array of human services that provide valuable safety nets to children, families, disabled, and seniors, including federal housing programs, SNAP, temporary assistance for needy families, Federal Drug Administration, Environmental Protection Agency, Women's, Infants, and Children, Social Services Block Grant, and Home and Care Community Block Grant. And whereas local and state governments do not have the capacity to supplant federal dollars during a shutdown, thus creating gaps in service. And whereas over 1.3 million people receive SNAP benefits in North Carolina, and whereas over 36,000 individuals receive SNAP benefits in Durham County, serving over 17,000 households, and whereas in Durham County, 60% of the SNAP caseloads have children under 18 years of age, and 27.4% include people of 60 years old or older. And whereas Durham County issues an average of $4.5 million in food and nutrition benefits that is pumped into the economy each month. And whereas community nonprofits, places of worship, and service providers do not have the capacity to expand services to meet needs during a federal shutdown. And whereas local nonprofits assisting with food insecurity issues only 5% of the need during normal operations, and whereas a federal shutdown can interrupt funds that protect children and adults from abuse and neglect, creating additional financial burdens on an already strained system, and whereas a federal shutdown could increase the risk of children and vulnerable adults and leave local government without services, and whereas human service programs help support economic viability through pumping critical dollars into the local economies through benefits, and whereas a federal shutdown threatens the health and well-being of communities across the country. Now, therefore, be it resolved, we, the members of the Durham County Board of Commissioners, do respectfully ask that the SNAP program be considered an essential service that protects the most vulnerable citizens and be exempt from impact during any federal government shutdown. Be it further resolved that we, the members of the Durham County Board of Commissioners, do respectfully ask Senator Burr, Senator Tillis, and Congressman Butterfield and Congressman Price to work to maintain federal operations and pass funding resolutions so that the federal government will not shut down at any time and threaten the health, safety, and well-being of our most vulnerable citizens. This 11th day of February 2019, Wendy Jacobs, Chair, James Hill, Jr., Vice Chair, Heidi Carter, Brenda Howerton, and Ellen Reckow. So thank you all again, everyone who's participated in this resolution. Okay, we have a number of consent agenda items, and just wanted to first see if there are any items to be pulled from our consent agenda this evening.
Gosh, I hate to do it because we already have 2 hours of work session business. Maybe I could just get this answered offline, actually. But it's the last item, 19-0079, Memorandum of Understanding to support Durham Crisis Response Center grant extension application, which, of course, I'm for. Sounds like a wonderful grant opportunity, continuation of something we already have. It just mentions the lethality assessment program that I've never heard of before, and I just wondered what the main elements of it are. But because it's so, because we have such a long agenda already.
Now, I actually forewarned Liz that this was a great opportunity to showcase the whole program and to make sure the community knows about it. So I gave her fair warning. Liz, if you could come up and respond to Commissioner Carter.
Hi, Liz. Nice to meet you.
And we'd love to hear about the Family Justice Center, and you have some important introductions to make as well. So,
okay.
So thank you for being here tonight.
Really appreciate it. So my name is Liz Heron. I'm the Family Justice Center Director with Durham Crisis Response Center. I'll let Kathy introduce herself.
Yeah, I'm Kathy Hodges. I'm the Deputy Director at Durham Crisis Response.
So the lethality assessment program, you'll hear a lot of people refer to it as LAP. For it. So it is one of 2 evidence-based models that are being used around the country to reduce domestic violence homicides and serious injury. So with this grant, we've been able to get training and implement the lethality assessment program here in Durham. We actually had our first weekend of training Durham police officers this past weekend. It's one of 5. So we've got 4 more weekends to go where we're training all patrol officers in how to administer the LAP assessment. And I've got copies of the questions if you'd like to see kind of what is in the screen. It's 11 questions. And it helps to identify serious injury cases and predictors of DV homicide cases. So if a victim when an officer responds to a scene, they will go ahead and administer this questionnaire to all victims in the case. If the victim were to answer yes to certain questions, they'll be considered screening in. The officer also has, based off of their own instinct, and maybe they've been to several calls at that home before, they could go ahead and screen a victim in if they felt necessary. If a victim screens in, the officer will automatically go ahead and call one of our advocates right then on the scene and connect them with DCRC services. And it's going to be a very brief phone call, just doing kind of a quick safety plan and making sure they're safe, and then how we can follow up with them. But just to give you all some stats, 44% of perpetrators who've murdered their partners had been arrested within the year prior to committing that murder, and only 4% of abused victims had used the DV hotline or shelter within the prior year of being murdered. And so the thought is, if we can connect, the advocate connect with the victim that night on scene, they might not be ready to leave right then, right? Because we know sometimes the most dangerous time for a victim is when they're trying to leave the relationship. But if we can connect with them right away, then at least we can start building a relationship and put together a safety plan to eventually get them to leave safely. I was part of the fatality review training at a conference last week. There's, I think, 4 counties in the state of North Carolina that participate in fatality review right now. And they said last year, when they reviewed all of their domestic violence homicides, every single DV homicide except for 1 happened when the victim had either left the relationship or was in the process of leaving the relationship. So we feel like this is extremely important and can help kind of bridge that gap between victims who maybe aren't seeking out services. It gives them an opportunity for us to connect with them right away.
Thank you so much, Liz. And could you also just, because we have people, the community listening, about what the Family Justice Center is?
Sure. So the Family Justice Center is a model. It's a co-location model where we have representatives from partners within the community that help assist domestic violence victims. So the idea is to try to have us all co-located eventually, where we would have representatives from the DV agency, which would be Durham Crisis Response Center. We would have representatives from the district attorney's office, from the police department, from the sheriff's department, from Child Protective Services. So it would make it a lot easier for victims to come in and get the services that they need if they can come to one place rather than having to go to several different places in the community. We also think it would be more beneficial for victims, but also partners as far as being able to connect with those victims too.
But right now, where can people find you?
Right now, we are located on the 2nd floor of the Durham County Courthouse, and we're 2,000. We have a couple offices in there right now. So, and there we operate. We do a lot of protective orders. Most of the protective order filings that happen in Durham County, we do out of there. We also provide court accompaniment in criminal and civil and family court. I think we're looking back at numbers in the last 27 months. This grant has allowed us to provide criminal advocacy support to 282 new clients. That doesn't include, continued court support for clients. And then in civil court, 591 individuals. That also doesn't include coming back for hearings or family court advocacy.
That's just this grant.
Yeah, just this grant.
Mr. Howerton.
So thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do. My question is, as for the numbers, is the numbers increasing?
As far as services clients were able to reach and assist?
Yes.
Absolutely. And we've actually been able to increase on the amount of protective orders, permanent protective orders, which are the year-long order that have been granted as well, have increased.
So is the only funds you have, is it just this grant?
As for all of Durham Crisis Response Center?
What you do?
Oh,
So there are basically two grants that fund the Family Justice Center. We have one to the Governor's Crime Commission, which is our Family Justice Center grant, which is a bigger grant and funds 5 or 6 staff people. And then there's this one that just funds 2 staff people.
Okay, so I think what I'm getting at is, do you have ample staff to do your work?
no.
That's a great question.
With what we have, but it would be, especially with the Family Justice Center, it would be helpful if we could have more staff. We had, in the past 5 days, we had 46 new clients come in for Family Justice Center, and that is just new clients. That does not include clients that we're already working with who are coming back for additional safety planning or additional court advocacy because their court date was continued. So that's just in 5 days, we had 46 people come into the center.
So I guess, Commissioners, what I'm getting at is, have we given any funds in our budget toward this?
Well, I think we can discuss this during our budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
I
discuss
think
this
I think
another time.
I think we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Liz, and I know you have something to hand out to us as well. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Awareness.
Yeah.
Teen violence. Yeah.
Yes, Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, and the color for Teen Dating Violence Awareness is orange. And we have pins for each of you that you can wear in solidarity with that issue this month.
Right, and you have somebody to introduce us to?
Yes. Yes. We have a brand-new executive director. He's been on duty for about a month now, and his name is Kent Wallace Maggs, and we're really glad to have him with us, and we're looking forward to y'all getting to know him much better.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Commissioner Recco.
Madam Chair, I don't want to pull this, but I just want to call out the matching grants program recommendations that we're approving tonight. I want to thank Brendan Moore, who's here. He's our open space land manager, for his work on it. But I just want to call out that we're funding 6 projects, 4 of them at school sites. And great geographic diversity. We've got 2 on the north side of town, 1 on the east, 2 in the central part of the community, and 1 on the south side. It's a great diversity. 2 involve additional trails, so our citizens can get out and do more walking. So just a great assortment of grants, adding up to a little over 77,000.
Awesome. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda items 18-1120 through 19-0079. Moved by Commissioner Howerton, seconded by Commissioner Recco. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the consent agenda is unanimously approved. Okay, now we have a presentation from Durham Tech about our newly revamped, renamed College Promise program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the Board of County Commissioners, I am Bill Ingram, President of Durham Tech, and I'm delighted to be here to speak with you tonight about the Durham Tech Promise. I want to start with a bit of background. In recent years, college promise programs, scholarship programs have emerged around the country of a recognition that the cost of higher education can be a barrier to young people who need post-secondary credentials to lead to well-paying careers. The first of these programs was the Tennessee Promise. It was established in 2014, and it provides the first 2 years of tuition at any of that state's community or technical colleges for for qualified students. There are currently 16 states that offer some version of a Promise program, and several others are considering similar initiatives. North Carolina does not have a Promise program. Governor Cooper proposed a Promise program in his 2017-18 state budget that was not enacted. But currently, several of Durham Tech's peer institutions in North Carolina offer some version of a Promise program, scholarships to guaranteed scholarships to qualified students. The most recent one to announce that was Chatham County, Central Carolina Community College, the Chatham Promise. Now, for most colleges, the Promise part of the scholarship is that eligible students are guaranteed a tuition-free education for some period of time. It might be a year, it might be 2 years, it might be till graduation. Each institution has its own variation of a program, but typically a Promise program combines federal aid with some form of special, either private or public support. These programs are referred to as last dollar scholarships, meaning the special support that's brought to bear is used to cover the difference between whatever federal aid the student receives and the last dollar of tuition. An issue with last dollar scholarships is they don't always support low-income students, because the greater the amount a student receives from the Pell Grant based upon their inability to pay out of pocket, the less support they get from the last dollar scholarship. For example, the maximum Pell Award this year is a little bit over $6,000, which is more than enough to cover a full-time student's in-state tuition and fees at Durham Tech. So, with a last dollar program, a student who's eligible for full Pell would not benefit from a last dollar scholarship, while a student who doesn't qualify for Pell because of a higher family income would receive the last dollar scholarship. Now, of course, both students, the Pell student and the non-Pell student, still require financial assistance or financial support for other expenses like books, fees, transportation, and housing. While the latter student, the student who is does not receive Pell, would be able to use family resources to cover those expenses, the Pell recipient will still need to work or rely on loans or both in order to cover the full cost of attending college. That brings me to the Durham Tech Promise. And I applaud the Durham County Board of Commissioners for your decision in 2011 to include Durham Tech in the quarter-cent special use sales and use tax that does support this program. As you may know, Orange County followed your lead 3 years ago and now provides similar support for Orange County residents as well. The Durham Tech Promise is a first dollar scholarship that provides up to $1,000 a year for up to 2 years for graduates of high schools in Durham and now in Orange counties who make Durham Tech their first choice for post-secondary education. That means that eligible students can use the Durham Tech Promise scholarship to cover tuition and fees before using other financial assistance. Since the first dollar approach of the Durham Tech Promise allows students to receive scholarship funds first, all students can use more of their other resources, whether it's from private support or whether it's from federal aid or family support for books, supplies, and living expenses. Now, this has been for several years a program we've called the Durham Connect program. But rebranding what was the Durham Connect program is only part of our story. We've adopted additional rules regarding who may continue in the program, specifically aligning our continued eligibility with federal government satisfactory academic progress rules. That means students who do not have a cumulative GPA after one term are placed on warning, and if they don't have a cumulative GPA after a second term, they're dropped from the program. We're also working very closely with our partners in the Durham public school system to get more students to commit to Durham Tech earlier through the Durham Tech Promise. I mean, I specifically say that Dr. Mubenga and his staff have been very helpful in promoting this effort. The school system has placed a Durham Tech Promise posting on their own website under scholarships for students, and they featured the Durham Tech Promise in many of their social media posts. We'll soon be starting a direct mail campaign targeted at families in our 2-county service area who have children between the ages of 15 and 18 who live in the household. And I hope you've seen the several billboards that feature the program that are now up in Durham. At a time when most other colleges in North Carolina are seeing declining enrollments, Durham Tech has experienced an increase for each of the past 4 years, largely the result of more recent high school graduates making Durham Tech their first choice for college. The Durham Tech Promise is intended to take advantage of that trend and help ensure more young people in Durham and Orange counties find an easy path to an affordable and high-quality education. And this fall alone, over 550 students from Durham are taking advantage of the Durham Tech Promise to help pay their tuition at Durham Tech. So on their behalf, that I thank you again for your foresight in supporting this program. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Bill. Commissioner Howerton.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Bill, this chart. Do you have?
I have,
We have a slide deck. Yeah, staff can move the,
I think it is the one with the
numbers
the
and,
retention rate.
yep.
yeah,
mhm,
Pell
yes.
eligible, yes.
Like-
Just for clarification.
Here we go. This one? Yes, okay. So I can explain this a bit. So this is a chart showing 4 years of students, their retention rates from fall to spring and from fall to the succeeding fall. So in 4 fall semesters, the total for students who were received, the first column is all first-time students at Durham Tech, first time in college, FTIC, in that from 2014 to 2017, about 3,400 students enrolled at Durham Tech for the first time. Of that group, 2/3, about 67%, returned to Durham Tech the following spring. The last column, during the same time, Durham Tech awarded 968 Connect funds, or now Durham Tech Promise scholarships. They're both funded by Orange and Durham counties. And of that group, 78% returned the following spring. So about 11% increase in retention from fall to spring with students who were receiving the scholarship program. And the middle column is students who are eligible for Pell, and the students in the Connect funds or the Durham Tech Promise outperformed that group as well, as over the course of 4 years, about 72% of the students returned for the spring semester. The bottom the bottom cells describe retention from fall to fall. And so during the for first-time enrolled students overall, about 45% of students who were here in one fall returned for the second fall, whereas for the Durham Tech Connect funds or the Durham Tech Promise students, that's about 60% total. And again, slightly much better than Pell students who are coming in about 45 or 46%. This year, a total of 560 students from Durham County alone have received the Durham Tech Promise. Of those, about 35 were private, charter, or homeschool students. 371 of those students were first-time enrolled at Durham Tech, meaning 189 returned from last year. Of the 560 who were enrolled this fall, 429, which about 78%, are still with us this spring.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Echo.
Well, I just want to say, as your representative on the Durham Tech Board, it was really a pleasure to work with the Durham Tech staff and other board members on this reboot of our scholarship program. there was a wonderful discussion, both at a committee meeting and at the full board meeting regarding this, and I think everyone was pleased with the marketing and with the new criteria. And I do think this chart does show that the Connect funds, as Bill indicated, are helping with retention of students. I think the fact that they don't have to worry as much about funds, they may not have to work as much along with their studies, may help them, but the bottom line is they are performing better, and that is a big issue. The board is monitoring retention because we want to see our students complete programs and actually graduate from programs, and so this is important. I think it's an important tool in the toolkit. And I also want to highlight, because the staff came up with this idea, and I just think it's wonderful, the concept of encouraging early opt-in. So they're going to be doing marketing earlier than senior year, and beginning to create a culture of thinking about college earlier in high school. And I think that opens up the opportunity for students to think a little more about starting maybe with the middle college, high school as juniors and getting an advance, because the interesting thing is they can often get enough credit, so maybe they only need 1 year after graduation to get the associate's degree. And it also, I think, begins to have them have more of an incentive to work harder in knowing that they can go on to college, that it's not going to be, money won't be a barrier. So this is really exciting, and the whole concept of creating hope in our students, among our families, that college is in their future. I just thought that was a great idea.
Just one other thing, just particularly for the public, so you could, how do they have access to this information? Is it through the counselors at the school?
Right, that's a great question, Commissioner Howerton. So this really is part of a larger strategy that we are developing with our school partners. We are, as I said, Dr. Mubenga and his staff have been very receptive to working with us, very eager to work with us. He came from I think the Franklin County schools, where there's a history of dual enrollment between high school and college that he brought with him. So we are using a portion of the sales and use tax funds to employ college liaisons, college employees who are spending in some cases 4 days a week in high school. I mean, some of them, Riverside is the largest producer of students coming to us, so we have a full-time person at Riverside. Other college liaisons share 2 schools, so it's 2 days one, 2 days another, but we're in the schools at least 2 days a week, interacting with students, working with their counseling and their CTE staff to encourage students to participate in this. And Dr. Mubenga has been very assertive in making sure that our folks are welcome there. So that's one way that students are learning about this. As I said, we'll be sending out a direct mail to every household in the community that has a child 15 to 18 to let them know about the program as well. And as we continue to engage with the public schools, and as we enroll more high school students in college classes, whether it's on Durham Tech's campus or actually in the high schools, we'll have another opportunity to give them information about this scholarship. So as to Commissioner Reckal's point, we envision a time when a student will be graduating high school well on their way to completing a college degree, and then between that and the Durham Tech Promise program, be able to complete an associate degree with nominal cost, if any cost at all.
Mr. Carter.
Yes, thanks for this great presentation. It really is a wonderful demonstration of Durham County's commitment to education now at the higher level, not just at the K through 12 level. I'm just wondering what are the current eligibility requirements for this scholarship? I may have missed that.
Yeah. Currently, the current eligibility requirements are that a student graduate from a high school in Durham and the requirements are slightly different in Orange County. Orange County limits students to who are graduates of public high schools in Orange County. But in Durham County, any graduate of a high school in Durham, public school, private school, charter school, homeschool, who comes to Durham Tech as their first higher education choice as within a year of graduating, and enrolls at least, if they enroll half-time, then they'll receive half a scholarship. If they enroll full-time, they'll receive a full scholarship, which is $500 a semester. After the first semester, if their GPA is above 2.0, they're able to continue for up to 4 semesters. If their GPA drops below 2.0, they're placed on warning. If after the second semester their GPA is not above 2.0, they're removed from the program. This is the first year we've added that feature to the program, so we'll see what that does in the way of reducing participation. But it's students who graduate from high school in Durham County and come to Durham Tech first. They are eligible for the scholarship.
No income?
No income at all. Again, what we didn't want to do was limit this. I mean, the Tennessee Promise serves middle-class families, and certainly middle-class families need help in paying for education. But our concern has been that in providing support for middle-class families at the expense of low-income families who are on Pell grants, then the students who have Pell have significant needs, as demonstrated by Pell, aren't getting the support that they really need to be successful, whereas the middle-class student has other resources they can draw upon.
And is it sort of first come, first serve? You know, whoever applies it first, or are these screened and ranked in any way? Or
if they come to Durham Tech from a Durham high school, they receive the scholarship. It's an automatic. It's an automatic award.
Okay.
They don't have to apply. They don't have to request it. It's there on their account when they register and when they pay for their classes.
I see. Okay. Would it be possible, do you have sort of demographic information on scholarship recipients?
Not at my disposal, but I can certainly provide it.
Yeah, I didn't think you had it tonight, but just I'd just be interested in seeing that. You indicate that.
I will say that it's more students of color than our typical student population, more low-income students than the typical student population, and more women.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I just have a few questions. In terms of this new implementation of performance,
Yeah.
what are going to be, or what kind of wraparound support or academic support is there also going to accompany the warning?
Right. Well, we provide, whenever a student is on financial aid warning, we provide them with access to tutoring, additional tutoring services. We their academic advisors spend time with them to make sure they're choosing the right courses that will lead to their success. So we do a lot of things on the sort of academic and student support side to get students off of academic warning from financial aid.
So when you literally send out that warning, does it say, and here are resources to help you, or?
I can't speak to what exactly the message is. I don't have that information, but I understand your point about
I just
trying
think
to
it's
make sure that we
important.
connect them with the right resources.
Yeah, I think that's
a good point.
very important, that
Sure.
when people are put on probation, that there's also at the same time saying, here's where we want to help you and here's how you can get help.
Excellent. point.
My other comment is the brochure. So I know you've already invested a lot into having these printed out, but for the next round, on page 2 of the brochure, the thing that struck me is it talks about how, you can get basically up to $1,000 per year for 2 years, and $500 per semester. But what's missing is the overall context of how much it costs to go to Durham Tech.
Right.
And I think my suggestion would be to look at that because,
Mhm.
like, when I read it, I'm thinking, okay, I'm a parent, so, okay, you get $2,000, but how much is it going to cost me? So is
Right.
this really going to help?
That's a good point.
And I think the good news is, yes, it really does it really will make it
Yeah.
within reach for a lot of people. So,
Yeah.
So you can just tell us right now, what is, if people get 500 of a semester, what is the average cost?
It's about a
semester?
40% discount. It's
40%.
mhm.
So yeah, I think that just should be
Right.
in the next, in any marketing that you can do, making sure
that-
people have that.
Yeah, we had that discussion on campus as well, and we will make
Yeah.
that adjustment the
Right.
next round of
Right.
publicity.
Because that makes it even more
Sure.
valuable. And just thinking, we had in our announcements, is that, there's a town hall meeting tomorrow night for
Mhm.
Durham Public Schools. So I don't know if you all plan to be there or have somebody there, but those types of opportunities are really great. I'm thinking back as a DPS parent,
Mhm.
whenever you have those big orientation meetings or whatever, those are great.
Mhm.
So I hope that you all are taking advantage of those.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Greco?
I think you make a good point on putting it in perspective, and I think in the future, you might even want to have on the website, at least, maybe not in a brochure, details showing how it would work, particularly also in conjunction with other scholarships that
Sure.
they apply for.
Right.
Where actually for a low-income student, they can have everything paid for, including, and then use our money for their books and transportation and whatever. So I just think that they're right and we had some discussion at the Student Success Committee, but I think that more should be done to just frame it so they understand the full implications.
So thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we next have a presentation from the Durham Housing Authority, and we have Anthony Scott here with us tonight. I do have one person signed up to speak on this item, Kevin Primus. And Kevin, if you would come up, and you've got 3 minutes, and please state your name and address. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Primus. I live at 3703 Kilgo Drive in Durham. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to put a little bit of a face to public housing and to make a connection between public housing and public transportation, public transit. In 1942, my father, Robert Primus, was 5 years old, and his family moved to the housing project in Pittsburgh, Chauncey Drive. His parents had 2 children at the time. They had 4 children. They had to move to another housing project on Summers Drive in Pittsburgh, and then a couple of the children left home, and they had to move again to the housing project on Bedford Avenue. Both of my father's parents worked. They both took public transportation to work. They took the trolley. They took the 82 Bedford to work. His mother worked at the post office. His father worked at Copper's downtown. That was where my dad got his first job as well. They were able to come out of the housing project. When my father met my mother, they lived there for their first year. My father was taking care of his younger sister because his mother had died, and his father was in the hospital. So like many African Americans, found themselves taking care of 2 generations. They lived in the housing projects for that first year, but they were able to move out. Okay? They were able to live there because public housing was tied to public transit. And we are in a crisis right now in Durham to make sure that public housing can continue to be tied to public transit. This trolley system was upgraded to a bus system. There was an upgrade in the public transit system that allowed public transit to continue to be an important part of public housing in Pittsburgh. My brother has 2 degrees from Georgia Tech in industrial engineering and a Harvard business degree. I'm the black sheep of the family. Black is beautiful, but I have 2 degrees from Duke University. He has an extra degree. My brother was awarded the Captain of Industry Award from the Institute of Industrial and Systems Engineers because public housing was tied to public transit and my parents' family could get to work. If we do not make this an important priority, we're going to be in big trouble. Duke University, in an article by Tammy Grubb, groups say Duke University impasse threatens to kill Durham Orange Light Rail project. The concerns that Duke have deal with public health, deal with community health. Mike Schoenfeld says, we are working with Go Triangle to address the university's continuing concerns about aspects of the construction operations of the light rail system that could compromise community health, research, and patient safety at Duke. This is our community health assessment for Durham County. You can see a Duke Health logo at the bottom, okay? There are 2 priorities that our community has identified. Access to affordable housing and access to care are number 1 and number 2 of the 5 priorities. Duke has this document. This is what the community has asked for. We haven't asked for paternalism, for Duke to tell us we need something else. The community has spoken. The community organizations that represent this health assessment, and I don't speak for them, I speak only for myself. But if you listen to the reports, if you listen to the people, there's a clear understanding that the backbone for community health, for affordable housing, for access to care is this light rail transit program. If Duke does not respond, I'm concerned if this is their priority. So I'm asking the commissioners, I'm asking Duke to come to an agreement with Go Triangle so that this actual stated need of the Durham community for access to care, access to affordable housing can be met through this Durham Orange Light Rail Transit project, and we need to find out if Duke is going to continue to be a good faith partner. We need them to sign on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we have Anthony Scott talking about the plans for redevelopment of downtown properties. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all for allowing me to present the Durham Housing Authority's Downtown and Neighborhood Plan. So this plan was a joint effort between the Housing Authority and the City of Durham, particularly its Community Development Department. We brought in a consulting firm called EJP. They're nationally known. They work with cities throughout the nation as well as work with housing authorities throughout the nation. And they brought in Lord Atkins Sargent, which is a fairly local architectural firm to work with us on our program concepts. So this plan began shortly after I arrived, and the idea was to look at the assets that the Durham Housing Authority had in the downtown area. It is no secret that the downtown area is very hot right now. And for us, we thought it made a lot of sense to begin there and take full advantage of the opportunities that the downtown growth is having so that what we do in the downtown area can help support those other communities outside of the downtown area that don't have the same market strength. So in the downtown area, we have the Oldham and Liberty Street development on Main Street, of course, across from the 500 block of Main, where you all have your parking lot, the DHA offices on the 300 block, Fayetteville Place, just south of the 147 freeway, Forest Hill Heights, just south of the ball field, J.J. Henderson Towers, and the city also asked us to take a look at a couple of sites that they also have, which is the Southside Phase 3 lot, as well as the Hunt Street Station, which has been vacated because they've combined the substation with the new police headquarters. There are key components to our downtown plan. First and foremost, we're taking full advantage of the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, or RAD. By doing so, it allows us to switch from the traditional, less stable public housing program to the more stable Housing Choice Voucher Program. And what I mean by that is that the funding sources for our two programs are entirely different, and they're funded entirely differently. And historically, housing authorities have gotten about 85% of the HUD designated financing that we should receive because of up and down funding from Congress, whereas the Housing Choice Voucher Program has been much more steadily funded. So we are looking at this program in terms of a way to bring greater stability to our financial resources. Secondly, it also allows us to borrow against the public housing assets, which is not commonly done. In fact, it's prohibited because of the deed of trust that's located on a property. But under this program, you are allowed to do that. We also are required to control any redevelopment that we do. So it's not a situation where we are getting completely out of the public housing business, as it's been often said in other jurisdictions, not so much here in Durham, but in other jurisdictions. Housing authorities are required to either be a part owner or at least control the nonprofit ownership of any redevelopment of those public housing communities. And another important point is that we must replace any existing public housing with one-for-one replacement. And that is including bedroom size per bedroom size. So if we demolish a 2-bedroom unit, we have to replace it with a 2-bedroom unit, 3-bedroom unit, et cetera. Next, our redevelopment sites will contain mixed income developments and, where possible, mixed use. We believe by doing this, it creates stronger social economic communities. We'll be better able to integrate into the existing communities that surround our public housing sites. The mixed income will include market rate units as well. And overall, by developing properties in this way, we create stronger financial stability throughout the long-term operation of our developments. Another key aspect of what we're required to do under the RAD program is that we must have resident input, and I'll talk a little bit about how we did that throughout this process. It also allows the transfer of units to other sites, meaning if we have a site that has 100 units, we could transfer some number or all of those units to other sites. And you'll see how we're doing some portion of that as we go along. And lastly, the residents have a right to return to the public housing sites that are being replaced, those one-for-one units. I'll talk a little bit about that. So what that means by resident right to return is that as a first priority, any new units that are redeveloped, those one-for-one replacement units, our existing residents, that is residents who are currently in public housing, get first options to move into those new units until all those residents are rehoused. So there's not some gamesmanship where we create these new units and then we don't allow those residents to come back to those units. So that is an important component within the RAD program. Any original resident is required to have, any original resident is not required to go through additional screening. So you can't all of a sudden say, well, you are a resident today, but now with this new program, we're going to rescreen you to make sure you qualify. If they qualified at the beginning of the RAD program, they're qualified throughout the move-in of that program. And lastly, our residents are required to be lease compliant, however, so they can't just decide they don't want to pay rent anymore, but they still are required to follow our lease. With respect to relocation, we are required to pay for relocation of any of our residents. That's including moving costs, any provision of mobility counseling, any services that residents need in that process. We're required to do all of that through at least 3 different programs. The Uniform Relocation Act, the Section 18 and/or the RAD rules all require us to take care of relocation efforts for our residents. So the overall process that we used in this was done in essentially 4 phases over the last year or so. The first phase was assessing what our existing conditions were. Secondly, we looked at establishing our vision and goals. And this is where, in both of those phases, we had a lot of community meetings, a lot of efforts to reach out to our existing public housing residents and residents that are in the surrounding community. For example, we surveyed our public housing residents, and we received feedback from 80% of our occupied units. They gave us input on what they'd like to see if we were to redevelop these communities. The third phase is where we developed our priorities and some work on our timeline. We also gave a lot of feedback to our communities in terms of what we discovered in the first two phases. And the last and final phase is where we are today, where we're looking at the results of this work and coming up with an implementation plan. So one of the key things when I talked about how we assessed our community, we looked at, obviously, the sites that we have, but we also looked at every other opportunity that was going on. This was back in 2017. So whether it was a private sector development, a public sector development, which includes, for example, the two sites that the county has, the 300 and 500 block. It includes the Willard Street property where the transit site is, and several types of private development that's going on. And obviously, we included the light rail line as well, which you see in the gray dots there.
But the downtown station needs to be added.
Yes, well, that's D. So the available new development, the downtown station, you mean the existing transit?
The one at
in front of
Blackwell
DPAC.
near Blackwell Street in.
Okay, yes.
There's
Well,
one more.
there are a couple other things that have happened since this, but
Yeah.
we'll update this map shortly. The gray line, dotted line, you see represents the light rail. The dots there represent the light rail stations. The dotted lines, circles that you see from that represents a half-mile walk to those transit stops. So you can see how strategically located our development sites are to those light rail stops.
I also want to highlight, I love this map because it also outlines the age of the county-owned properties, something
Yes.
that I've been urging us to focus on because there are a few parcels that may have development potential related to affordable housing.
Exactly. So we took a look at this, and this helped fuel our opportunities. We looked at the market, and from that, we were able to determine what would be the best options for the development of these sites. So not only will we receive input from the community, that's both our public housing community, surrounding community, businesses, et cetera, but it also included looking at what the market tells us via a market study.
The significance of the circles, the large circles drawn around. It's a large circle drawn around.
So each of the circles
What is that?
are centered by a light rail stop. So that's the center stop, and the circle goes around that.
The large circle, what's the significance of that?
It shows you a 15-minute walk to that transit stop.
Half-mile radius around.
So anything within that circle is 15 minutes or a half mile from the
Okay.
transit stop.
Okay.
And if you had the DPAC stop, actually, it would include some more that's not in there right now.
That's very true. And again, this was before they made some shifts and moves on those. So these are just some shots showing some of the community meetings we had. And by the way, I thank you guys for allowing us to use the DSS building. Drew in particular was helpful in that. But most of our meetings were held at our public housing community sites. We also included a meeting at NCCU. And as a result of all of that input, these were some of the key findings that we had. These are just a couple of the design ideas that were presented to the community. And this was 2 of 4 that the community actually honed in on and says, we like the architectural character of these types of buildings. But other key findings between the community and the market study showed that they wanted to see a mix of housing types. They wanted to have increased open space, higher density on major corridors, breaking up of these large super blocks that DHA properties have, community compatibility, and of course, connection to the Durham Orange Light Rail. So with all of that work over the last year, you see the key goals that were derived from that. These 7 goals represent a lot of what we've already talked about, but one, that we would add additional affordable units to our existing inventory, that we would integrate supportive services for our families, mixed use, and where possible, including office and open space with retail as well. connecting and leveraging partnership opportunities, whether it be the public sector or the private sector, maximizing our market potential, phasing in a minimum, as we do phasing, we would minimize the disruption to our residents. And lastly, that there would be a mixing of housing choice. This is a summary of what our plan is going forward. We have a total of 447 units on those 50-plus acres in the downtown area. With this plan going forward, we would increase that by a factor of 5 to over 2,500 units. 26% of those will be market rate, and 74% of those will be affordable, including the replacement of the 447 Durham Housing Authority sites, units. Additionally, there'll be over 100,000 square feet of open space and nearly 270,000 square feet of retail or commercial or office space as well.
And Anthony, what is the current number? You said that,
We currently have 447 public housing units,
so the plan is to go from 447 to
over
20
2,500.
2,500. Wow.
So I'm going to walk you through what that's going to look like on a site-by-site basis. This, first of all, is the phasing that we see. There's 7 different phases, and those phases have sub-phases, as we'll talk about a little later. And this also shows you the breakdown of how the units are dispersed throughout those 7 key sites. And this also includes 60 units. I talked earlier about transferring units. So we would transfer 60 units of those 447 to other sites. That includes the Willard Street property near the transit station, the county parking lots that you guys are developing, and also we have a commitment to another site where the Kell Street site, which one of our homeless providers is looking at doing some development there.
And just to clarify, the 60 are the Section 8 vouchers, the 30% AMI and below?
That is correct. So this will walk you through what each of those development sites would look like. The first we'll start with is the Odom Liberty site, the 500 block of Main Street, across the street from your parking lot. This is currently 214 units. Odom Towers has 106. Liberty Street Apartments has 108. And I should mention, by the way, with all of those 447 units, this is the Liberty Street Apartments is the only family site. The rest are all senior buildings. This is what the scheme for that site would look like, having higher density on the left and a lower density as you get closer to the residential areas to the right. That's what the yellow represents, lower density. And the purple represents office retail space along that Main Street corridor. So you can see on this site, we'd have over 530 units and up to 47,000 plus square feet of non-residential space.
Anthony, do you have a breakdown of how many would be single, one person, 2-bedroom?
I'll talk about that towards the end.
Okay.
Or collectively, not
Yeah.
site by site, but collectively.
Yeah, okay.
Excuse me. This is what this looks like in a 3-dimensional view. You can see along Main Street, of course, higher density along Main Street, and a slightly lower density as you move to the residential area on the left. Our next site is Forest Hill Heights. This is a 15-acre site that currently has 55 units. And we would reposition that site so we would go from 55 units to 575 units, and at least 14,000 square feet of retail and commercial space on that site. So you see it's, again, a combination of higher density here as you get closer to the Durham Freeway, 3 stories here, 5 stories here. In the middle is parking structure wrapped by the housing. And then here you see 3-story and as low as 2-story buildings as you get closer to the more residential areas here.
Can you say the numbers again, going from what to what?
Pardon me?
How many units?
55 units are currently on that 15-acre site, and we're going to go to 575.
It's amazing.
Well, so when you look at our sites, 50-plus acres and only having less than 450 units, it's an excellent opportunity, particularly being in downtown where there is now an expectation of greater density.
And what percentage of the 575 are considered affordable, and what percent are market rate? There's a mix in all of these.
I'm going to give you the overall mix
Okay.
towards the end. I don't
Okay.
have it broken out by site. But I
Okay.
can
But there
tell you
is a
the
mix
cumulative
at
mix.
every site.
Yes. So in general, I tell you that 26% of the 2,500 units are market rates, and the 74% are 80% and below. Of that 74%, 18% represents the 447 units.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, let me go back and, so this is a three-dimensional view of that. Again, you see the parking deck wrapped by housing, slightly higher density as you're up against the freeway, and lower density as you step down more towards a residential area. Next up is Fayette Place. So with this 20-acre site, which has no units on it at all, those units were removed over 12 years ago, you will go from 0 units to 533, inclusive of, and this was something that a lot of the community talked about, the desire to have a grocery store. So along the Fayetteville Street corridor, there's only a small portion of the site that actually touches the Fayetteville Street corridor. The rest is sort of tucked away, and if you're familiar with this site, it sort of slopes down towards the freeway. So it's a good opportunity to create a slightly higher density back in that corner. And I should mention that the light rail stop is somewhere right around here. We've talked to Go Triangle about how we could share parking with them along in either one of these two decks. And you can see higher density here, lower density in these two areas. This is what this looks like in 3D. You notice that we also have another great park in the middle of this site because of the size of it. It yields the opportunity to do that. You're breaking up these blocks so that they're more in line with a typical Durham City block.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
I noticed in the phasing that Fayette Place was 5th. Why 5th?
So if you allow me to get to the end, I can talk about the phasing and why it's structured the way it is.
Okay,
If you
sure.
don't mind. Okay. Next site is the old Hunt Street substation or Rigsby Street station. This is about a 2-acre site, and this is owned by the city. They asked us to take a look at this as opportunity for us to create additional housing there. The scheme for this is about 136 units and a little less than 8,000 square feet of non-residential uses. This is what this would look like in 3-dimensional form. 5-story residential building, stepping back to 3 stories in this area. Next site is the Southside 3, it's the final phase of the Southside development. Again, owned by the city, roughly 3 acres. What we discovered later as we were doing this is that you see an L-shaped building and then a parking, like a 2-story parking tray. We discovered later that this site is actually also owned by the city, and it is not buildable as a residential space. So we can move the parking over to this space because that would be perfectly suited for parking, and we can actually increase the number of housing units on that existing site.
What's a tray?
It's a sort of 2-story, relatively
Okay,
small sort of parking structure, but it's not a full-on concrete deck.
got it.
And this is what the existing scheme would look like in 3-dimensional form. So one of these sites, as you guys are aware, includes the DHA offices, and through permission from you all, I said, would you mind if we took a look at the idea of how we could incorporate the criminal justice building in this scheme? And what that does is it allows us to go from having a little over an acre on our site to 1.5 acres. And there's a slight typo here, and this says 0.47 acres. It's actually 1.47 acres. So if you look at our site alone, when you look at the parking that we have in our building, and then if you even include this, which is essentially a non-usable space, it's mainly used for parking right now, but there's this sort of island here that has no real function whatsoever. There's a street that runs through here, goes in, connects to that parking area along with the deck. But when you look at this holistically, you can see a very different opportunity for the site here.
So with that one, you're assuming our building would.
Yes, I think I
Yes.
understood you. So in this scheme, that we're looking at this in two different ways, or at least two different ways. One is we do nothing with the criminal justice building. We just take full advantage of the physical space around it. Another, if you choose to live on the edge a little, you can look at repurposing the criminal justice building, still remaining intact, but just looking at a way of repurposing it. And I'll show you what that looks like. So this is kind of in between. So what it means here is that here's the criminal justice building, again, still intact because it's a historic building. We're not going to tear it down or anything, but we could repurpose the use of that building and having additional office retail space, say, in the front, and then convert this to housing. Or you can leave this exactly as it is today, and you would just have less housing than what we're projecting here. But there's no reason that we have to do anything with that criminal justice building. But by utilizing the full site, you can actually create additional housing up to 290 units by some partnership between DHA and the county, and combined another almost 22,000 square feet of commercial and retail space.
And as you know, it's pieces of things that are basically not being, they're not usable the way they are now. I mean, they're just kind of random little pieces of parking lots, so.
Correct.
I just think that that's an important historic property.
Yeah.
We have invested a lot of money in location.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this is what that would look like in 3D, leaving the building completely intact because it is a historic building that we think is a valuable contribution to the downtown area, but we could build around it and create a very different look for that block. So that takes you to all of the future projections of what we're looking to do. But here's what's actually already started. The J.J. Henderson site, which now currently has 178 units in about a 7 or 8 story tower, excuse me, it's being looked at now as a new repurposed use for that site. We would maintain the existing J.J. Henderson building of 178 units, add a new 80-unit building here, and even look at adding some for-sale townhouses here. Now, some time ago, some of you saw a scheme that looked more like this, where we said we'd add a new building here, and this is how JJ looks currently. So you can see from when you go to concept to reality, things will sharpen and change a bit. So this space right here is a 1-story community space that exists now. We would remove that completely, which would allow us to get more parking here. That community space would be repurposed and constituted here in the existing building. There'd be a covered walkway to allow the residents from existing JJ to actually access that building, as well as the residents in the existing new building as well. So this has been submitted for a 9% tax credit this past January. The final application is due in May. The 4% tax credits, that will be used for the renovation of the J.J. Henderson building will be submitted in June. So we should be underway with construction on that site no later than the beginning of 2020. So this is a representation of what that new building will look like. This is very schematic at this point. It's going to be very different than that, but it gives you a sense of what that building can look like. So here's how this breaks down in terms of the phases, and I'll get to a couple of questions that we had. So the 9% tax credit program is the most critical component to the success of this, because those are competitive dollars, and because Durham can only receive one 9% tax credit award a year. We have 10 different phases that require 9% of the total 17 phases of these developments. Because of that, we will see automatically that we are looking at least a 10-year window, unless and until we can convince the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency to change the way it currently distributes the 9% tax credits. We firmly believe that with a plan like what we have and the fact that we're utilizing the RAD program, that the state should reconsider how it issues 9% tax credits. But that's a battle that's going to take some time to accomplish. Assuming that that doesn't change, we know that minimally our 9% tax credits are going to carry us out at least 10 years. The other 7 phases are primarily funded using 4% tax credits, which have no competitiveness to them and no cap. So we'll be able to do those integrated along with the 9% tax credit deals. Yes.
So why in the unit mix that you show on this slide is the low income component so low at 18% of the unit of the rent mix?
So that 18% represents the replacement of the DHA units. Those are the public housing units effectively. And remember, with the public housing unit, which averages $238 a month is what our residents pay, the balance of that cost is a subsidy from the federal government. So there is no new public housing units that can be created because Congress is not allowing you to create new public housing units. So if we want to be able to supply more of those lowest income units, you have to figure out how to make up the subsidy for what people can afford to pay. Other than public housing, there is no operating subsidy out there that exists. So even if we were given a completely brand new free unit, $238 a month is not enough to maintain that unit over time. So we are limited in creating these new additional public housing units because there's no additional subsidy that we have access to.
I see. So even though there's demand for more lower income units, you can't create them.
That is correct.
So in the workforce, when it says workforce, tell me what percentage of median that would be at?
So that is a combination of up to 60 and 80% affordable units.
And what about 30 to 50?
Well, it includes 60 is the cap and 80 is the cap. So anything below that would be included, depending on people's actual income who apply.
So between 30, 60, and then 60 to 80.
Right. So it's really between 30 and 80% is what that workforce housing represents. I should point out that I talked about the $238 a month is what public housing residents are currently paying. When you look at their incomes, they're actually at 16%. So we talk about 30% and below, but the reality is it's literally almost half of that 30%, down to 16% is what our $13,000 income equates to.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
With that 18%, how many people that move out will be able to move back in? So
Well,
if
again,
they move out,
anyone who is currently a public housing resident has rights to come back. So there is no moving out and not having ability to come back in. We're required by law that anybody who's currently a public housing resident has a right to come back to those replacement units, and we have to
will
replace
they
one for
come
one.
back at the same rate that they are in now?
Yes, yes. There's no requalifying them. And remember, it's all income-based. So unless their income somehow changes, they're still going to be paying the same amount of rent because it's based on 30% of your income. And that's the same thing would have happened if they were in regular public housing anyway. So if your income goes up, then we adjust your rent based on your income. So there's literally no difference in how people are qualified and what they end up paying for rent because you're in this new RAD program.
I guess I'm thinking that if you're saying you will only have 18% of units, and it just seems like you'll have more than 18% moving back in at that rate.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the logic there. Please walk me through what you're...
Well, if you only have 18% in housing availability,
Mhm.
and people move out, there's going to be a difference between the rate that they move back in. And
Well,
I'm thinking you'll have more at the 18% than you will at a higher.
So keep in mind, these are still essentially public housing units. So you still would qualify for those units just like you would any other public housing unit. So we're just reincorporating those public housing units with other income types. So those RAD units are still going to have the same income qualifications as the current public housing units have. So as people move out, new people will come in that are still qualifying just like they would for quote-unquote normal public housing. And keep in mind, with public housing, there's actually an 80% cap on qualified people. So you actually can make up to 80% of your income and move into of the AMI and move into public housing right now today. So to your question, Mr. Hill, the reason why we're taking this particular phasing is with Fayette Place, our market study shows that in order for us to maximize the number of units and the kind of opportunities there, the market is not quite ready for Fayette Place site to be developed. Because we talked about, we did market studies for each and every site. We studied that carefully because the key thing we want to do is we don't want to underdevelop and then later you find out you could have had a better opportunity. So when we looked at this, the JJ site, it was selected number one because it is the best qualified site based on how the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency rates properties. Next in line is sort of the Odom Liberty site, et cetera, et cetera. With Fayette Place, we need a little more seasoning of the market in order for us to take full advantage of those 20 acres there. One of the things that we know is important is being able to do some work on that Fayetteville Street corridor. That will help enhance the marketability of that site. One of those key things that the residents asked for was a grocery store. We know that it's going to be hard to get grocers to have an interest there given the current condition of that Fayetteville Street corridor, given some of the other conditions that are in their general community. So all of this is looking at how do we fully maximize what we can do on each and every one of these sites.
I think one of the reasons I was emphasizing Fayette Place was, number one, it's been vacant for over a decade. And number two, to the point about the Fayetteville Street corridor, yeah, I mean, that vacancy, right, that empty space hurts any kind of development there because no one can do anything with it, right?
Well, that's true. I'm going to push back just a little bit, though.
Right.
But you recall that site has very little frontage on Fayetteville Street. Very, very small, relatively speaking, to the full 20 acres. So even though those 20 acres are vacant, from the Fayetteville Street side, you don't really get to see the vastness of that because of the way the site sort of juts out with that little arm.
Agreed, right. But if people knew that there would be 500 plus units behind it, right,
Agreed.
maybe there would be more emphasis for a grocery store if someone knew that was coming.
But keep in mind, the 500 plus units are only if the market will allow us to get there. So right now, the market study is saying it wouldn't support 500 plus units. It would be a lesser number thereof. And so in looking at this, it's like if we can do some other things in that community, and we're already are talking to the community members like the Grant Street community and obviously the city, if we can do other things to enhance that corridor as well as some of the other areas around there, we can fully maximize those 20 acres. And that's really the goal.
What enhancements do you see would need to be?
So some of the vacant properties that are in and around the area, and that's in addition to the Fayetteville Street corridor, but that's also some of the housing units that are there, doing some efforts around renovating some of those units. All those things are critical pieces to what the market study tells us will help make that site much more viable. But the Fayetteville Street corridor is one of the key things. Even when you think about those shopping centers that are up there, the vacant, what is it, a car wash or something that's just prior to getting to our site. So there's some things that can be done there. Not to mention looking at how we can have greater connectivity to NCCU is also something we think will enhance the opportunity on that site as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, so much for this presentation. I have some questions also, but I want to let other commissioners ask theirs. Commissioner Carter?
I mean, I would just first of all say this is a beautiful set of plans. Very exciting. Every plan looked much more enticing than the current DHA sites. And so I think that's just very exciting to think about the future there and the way that we're going to be preserving the affordable housing that we have, which is critical to being sure we have enough housing for people here in Durham. One of the questions that I keep coming back to is, and maybe is a requirement for a certain amount of parking, but it just seems like there's so much parking in your plans, parking decks and parking lots. And, you know, my thoughts and visions and hopes for downtown Durham include less parking and more transit. And it's hard to know, you know, which comes first, the demand for the transit or the supply of the transit. But as long as we provide parking, I just feel like it's going to be more difficult to get the kind of ridership and the demand that we want for transit. Maybe it's that when you're building these DHA sites, they have to have parking at, you know, a certain ratio of parking per unit.
That is in fact
the case?
Unfortunately, that is the case. Because of the low-income housing tax credits, they have minimum parking requirements. We have been able, for example, with the J.J. Henderson site, we've been able to get a reduction of that because there are senior buildings. Both of those buildings will be senior buildings, and we've been able to show that we could use less. We can actually utilize less parking because we have a record that shows that. So we've been able to reduce some of that. But in general, when you're dealing with the family sites, the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency has some very, very harsh requirements around parking. And speaking of which, this particular site, the idea of the combined DHA and the criminal justice site, so with this parking site deck here, which, you know, we know that it's kind of deteriorating and falling apart. And one of the thoughts, in fact, I remember when I talked to Commissioner Ellen around this, we talked about, well, wouldn't it be great if we can incorporate some of that parking across the street? We think that we can convince the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency to allow us to include that parking across the street as available parking in a joint shared way. And that would go a long ways towards obviously reducing the cost. As you guys are aware from the 300 and 500 block, the structured parking is about $24,000 per space. And, you know, I kind of looked at that and sort of said, well, over 30 years, that's an additional $130 or $140 per month additional cost on a unit that has to have that parking structure. When you think about $24,000 amortized over 30 years, that's what it works out to be. So it does have a tremendous impact on the affordability of these units.
Are you saying that in these plans, the plans include the least amount of parking that you can get away with based on requirements from the tax credit?
Now I say that in terms of we have not, because these are plans. Now I should point out that these are all financially viable deals. So these were done with numbers and what have you. So we looked at the true cost of building these. So it's a $566 million plan for the 2,500 units. And those are based on real numbers. If we had $566 million today, we could build all of what you see. And as we bring on development partners for each one of these deals, we can then go to the NCFHA and say, hey, we'd like to reduce the parking because we're next to the light rail station stop, or we have an agreement with the county to do some shared parking or things like that. And so we'd make arguments to try to reduce that parking burden.
I see. That sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And also, again, I appreciate you guys being open to the idea of looking at this. So there are a couple of things that I think that the county could contribute to help make this a success. One, obviously, is agree to the idea of some sort of partnership around this site. And one of the things that makes that even more viable is that there's zero land costs associated with that, because obviously, whatever there is a cost associated with land, that means it's going to be an increase to the overall project cost. The shared parking idea that we've already talked about being another. And of course, we're not opposed to any kind of cash equity contribution you would be willing to make, because with this scheme, we do have right now a projected gap of approximately $84 million. So we've been talking with the city of Durham around how we could possibly fill that gap. We're going to hold our development partners' feet to the fire to help figure out how we can fill that gap. but anything that the county is interested in doing and helping to fill that gap obviously would be appreciated. And then lastly, as I talked about the QAP process, the Qualified Allocation Plan, having support from the county that we could take to the state and say that you all are fully on board with the plan that we've devised here, and that it's important that we look at this instead of a 10-year plan, maybe a 5-year plan, or at the most a 7-year plan. And we are partnering with the city to go and talk to that state agency. We're talking to state representatives, et cetera. But we think that the only way we're going to be able to get that change in the Qualified Allocation Plan is a lot of communication from elected officials, whether it be local elected officials or state elected officials. We've already been in communication with them, telling them about what we're looking to do. We're going to go back and present this plan as well. But we think the uniqueness of the RAD program for a public housing authority warrants the state reconsidering how it allocates those 9% tax credits.
So Anthony, I just want to thank you for your visionary leadership on all of this. It's very exciting. So you have given us 3 ways that the county can help. You know, you and I partnered on a national legislative goal that was adopted by the National Association of Counties related to expanding the RAD program. So we are happy to help advocate at the state level. If you just let us know if there's some letter or a resolution or whatever, that please feel free to forward that to us and we can take that up.
Okay.
In terms of
And there's one quick other important piece I want to add, is that that $566 million development includes over $400 million of construction. We have a 60% unemployment rate for work-able adults in our public housing communities. We're working with the Office of Workforce and Economic Development, the Community Development Department, and we've been having discussions with Durham Tech to have that on-ramp for these residents in our public housing communities and the surrounding community to have access to those construction jobs. So that's part of this plan as well. And additionally, there'll be at least 100 new permanent jobs created because of the ongoing operational needs that we have for these communities. So we're thinking about this holistically, and we look forward to being able to be back to you all with more indications of our great success.
Well, thank you. And also, so in terms of our staff, we absolutely want to make sure that you are partnering with our staff, looking at the CJRC site. I don't know where that was on your phasing plan, but
Number
also
3.
the shared parking. I want to ask you though, Anthony, so much of the vision for this whole plan is related to the light rail. And in terms of thinking holistically, I know that the Housing Authority's vision is that it's, you know, creating a mixed income communities, but that it's not just about housing, as our Kevin Primus eloquently stated, that this is actually about connecting people to good paying jobs and transitioning people out of poverty. You know, what our 30% AMI and below units should really be looked at as transitional units, where we can use them as a pipeline to then move people out of those units once they have ways to really sustain themselves. So what is going to happen if we don't have the light rail in terms of the funding? The whole market study, did the market study include the light rail, and just the vision, the holistic vision that we have?
Right. So when you think about the impact of the light rail, you can think about it kind of a twofold, right? One is just the access to the job markets that we all know about. The top three of the top 10 job centers are based on that rail line. So our residents, our public housing residents, would have greater access to those job centers. We also have to think about in terms of those market rate units where you have a lot of millennials who are coming in and says, I don't want a car, I want access to public transit. So that's going to affect the marketability of those market rate units. And those market rate units are important because that helps create financial stability for those developments over time. You know, they're paying higher rents than some of the others, it all evens out. But that means that we're able to maintain these units over the long haul. When I talked earlier about how we have a deficit of funding from the federal government, you know, in 2010, $26 billion is what HUD determined was undercapitalized in public housing units. That number has now ballooned to $57 billion of the 1.1 million public housing units across the country. So for us to be successful, we don't have deteriorated units like we're dealing with now. Mixed income is an important component of that. So those marketability of those market rate units is going to be critical, and tying that to the light rail is one of the key drivers of millennials and others who are interested in being in those market rate units.
I think that's a really important point that you just made, is that the light rail is fundamental, even for the financing of these units. That is really important point.
Absolutely. Not to mention the argument to the state to say why we need less parking. We make an argument that we're half a mile from the transit stops. We don't need as much structured parking, et cetera. Remember, that's $130 per month that we save on costs to those properties over time. $130 per month because of that $24,000 it costs for structured parking.
And I just want to highlight when you said that 60% of your residents are unemployed.
The work-able residents.
Work-able residents. And that the average income for your residents is what?
$13,000.
$13,000. And I want to highlight a report that was actually sent to all of us from an excellent report from the Early Childhood Mental Health Task Force Steering Committee that was sent to the Durham ACES Task Force. Really striking that so many of the trauma that people in Durham are experiencing is women and children are directly tied to poverty. It says here, as indicated in several of these statistics, low income is a major factor. 26% of Durham's children live in poverty, exacerbating their vulnerability by limiting access to transportation, housing, safe neighborhoods, education, nutritious food, and exercise, while simultaneously adding stress to the lives of the caring adults on whom they rely. Although poverty and ACEs cross race and ethnicity, racial disparities play a role in poorer health outcomes among Durham's children. For example, 37% of Black children in Durham and 36% of Hispanic children in Durham are below the poverty level, as compared to only 8% of white children. So we cannot underestimate the importance of this project, of the importance of the light rail to this project and helping to address poverty in Durham.
I can point out that 1 out of every 5 residents that are in poverty live in DHA public housing unit.
Commissioner Recco?
Thank you for your attention.
Commissioner Recco's
sorry.
comment.
So I appreciate seeing the holistic vision across, a wider area than what we originally talked about. This is very helpful. And I just want to emphasize that several of us attended a workshop at the National Association of Counties meeting last summer on affordable housing. And it was emphasized one of the best resources for providing affordable housing in your community is the public land that you already have. And what you're showing is reutilizing that land in a more effective manner, and in addition, mining other sites for utilization. This map on development opportunities in the downtown is very important because we see that there are many opportunities and a number of them. I have asked now for a couple of years for us to look at this in a strategic. I still think we should. This could definitely be part of the equation. The thing that I would caution you on is I don't necessarily see us putting in cash associated with the criminal justice. I mean, I could see us collaborating with you on land availability, but I mean, if you stay for the next item, you're going to see we've got
Oh, I
a
understand.
lot on our
I
plate.
understand the competing
Trying
priorities.
to expand to universal pre-K. So, but it still means we could be a very important partner because land is very expensive.
Thank you.
Yeah, just want to put a word of caution out there.
No, it's, as they say, you don't know unless you ask.
Thank you, but there's plenty of ways we can partner.
There is.
So, all right, thank you so much. Okay, next, we are going to have a quarterly update on our Durham pre-K. So we have Linda Chappelle with us, and I guess you've got some other folks with you as well you might want to introduce.
Okay.
He's disappearing.
We're all running away.
Please don't take offense at that.
Don't take it
No, I
personal.
won't.
Yeah, don't take it personally.
Once again, I'm happy to join you following a presentation about affordable housing.
That did happen before, didn't it?
The last update I did was following affordable housing. Very important topic. I'm Linda Chappelle from Child Care Services Association. I am joined by several staff members, Monty Griggs, who's the Director of Technical Assistance in our office, as well as Alex Levis-Stalot, who's the Durham Pre-K manager, senior manager. We are here to give you an update, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity. You received a written update, and I will talk briefly and expound on that, and then give you plenty of time to ask questions. I'm sure you'll have them. I do want to say before I do my presentation that as you're thinking about affordable housing and expanding it in Durham, we would love it if you'd consider preschool needs in those locations for families, because families have children. So as we grow this program in Durham, we always want to keep the children in the center. So I like to bring us back to what's really important. So as you're aware, our focus is to assure that all of our children are reading on grade level by the end of third grade. That's our primary focus in this investment. Cradle to career is very important, but our first milestone is making sure that children are reading at grade level. Just to remind you where we are at this point, I used this same chart the last time we updated. We are engaged in numerous activities to review the systems that currently serve 4-year-olds with public funds. The evidence is there. We've gone over and over again about the fact that evidence is there that supports the work. We're focused, in Durham, we're focused on the question of how to design and implement programs that ensure our investments consistently deliver on the promise. So we've already made the decision to invest, and we're working really hard to make sure that what we do makes sense. So tonight, the last time I was here, I showed you these the overall work, that we're doing moving forward consists of a number of parts. I'm not going to talk to you about all of these tonight. I am going to focus on updating you in specific areas first that focus on families. So we have expanded the application process in planning for the 2019-2020 school year. Application appointments for school year 1920 began February 4th. The first round of applications, developmental screenings, and placements will extend all the way through the end of May, but then we'll continue on a rolling basis after May, which is new, and and different from what had been done previously. So to update you on where we are, our governance committee met and approved the Durham pre-K eligibility requirements and sliding scale. They decided to make the program free for families at or below 300% of federal poverty. We're going to start charging a parent fee at 300% on a flat percent of a family's gross monthly income. And I'm going to show you a chart in just a moment. We're going to use a tiered system that starts that flat percent at 4% at the 300% of federal poverty and moves to 7% at 350%.
And Linda, can you explain to us why you decided to do free at
Yes, I can.
300%?
I definitely can. So, just to show you why this matters and where it fits. So there are other publicly supported pre-K programs that we are building Durham's local investment on. We're enhancing. We are not creating separate siloed programs. But many of these programs have eligibility cutoffs. What Durham Pre-K has done is created a universal program open to any family, but creates a priority for lower income families by having the sliding scale. So where these programs are, you can see the 200% of federal poverty level is right in the stair step where a child care subsidy voucher is available. And remember, there are waiting lists for every one of these programs. So we are not trying to say that all the children are being served in this continuum. So where Durham Pre-K is falling is we decided to begin charging at 300% of federal poverty level because it was right in the middle of where the median, right at where the median family income falls. So this is a family of 3 income eligibility crosswalk. Now, all these numbers don't mean much unless you have context. So just to show you how this would work, so families that fall at 300% of federal poverty, the flat fee of 4%, you'd multiply it by their gross monthly income. And so for a family of 4 making $76,000, this would represent a $253 a month investment for their 4-year-old child. This is well below the cost of high-quality child. For families at 350%, you can see, doing the same math, it falls at $513 a month. Now again, just to show you what that looks like. So the thing, this was a very debated subject by the governance committee. And the reality is we would love to have universal pre-K for 4-year-olds that's free for every child in Durham. We would love that. But the reality is that the need is much greater than the spaces available. And we know that many of our children who live in poverty do not access high-quality programs. So the issue becomes we only have so many spaces, and how are we going to assure that children access them? We know that the middle-class families really have difficulty accessing high quality. And so the feeling was that having a sliding scale opened the opportunity door for some of those families. Now,
Does the subsidy end at the 120?
it keeps going up until, I just stopped it here, it keeps going up into the cap of $1,250 per month, which is what we are reimbursing programs at.
Don't understand.
Okay. So this chart just goes to a family that makes $120,000 as an example. But as you move up the scale, what we said was that if you continue to scale, the actual cost for a program that for the county is more than $12.50 per month per child because you're investing in administration, in other costs. We are reimbursing programs $12.50 per child per month to direct service the program. We didn't want families to pay more than $12.50 per month. If you make $215,000 a year, you would pay $12.50 per month. We capped the sliding scale at $12.50 per month.
Say that again?
That doesn't make sense.
Say that again. That didn't
Okay?
Look, can we also back up and remind ourselves who's made these decisions? It's a large governance committee, is that right?
Yes, we have a governance committee that is
Curious.
representative across Durham, and they spent quite a bit of time looking at what the options are. So help me understand what your questions are. You don't understand about the sliding scale, or you don't understand why we have a sliding scale?
I think the concern is that that the subsidy keeps going for families that could make $175,000 a year, $185,000 a year. There's still a subsidy. The subsidy doesn't stop until you get $215,000 per year. I think that feels like it's rather high for it to subsidize that. Yeah.
Okay, I hear you. So let me address part of that. So the governance was concerned that the spaces go to the most needy families and proposed capping those families on the sliding scale at 30% of all children in the program. So the idea of across Durham, the need is great. We have committed through the work of the task force that we would have a universal program. So the question becomes, if a program is universal, do you say it's only available to a few? So going back to the other programs, if you're a family of three and you make more than $40,840 a year, you can't access a child care voucher, as an example. Okay, so if you make a sliding scale, there's certainly the option to cap it. And the county could say, we're not going to have a universal program. We want to make, because what I'm hearing you say is that you're uncomfortable that higher income families would still have a subsidy.
So I'm going to make a suggestion, Linda, because this is a night meeting and it's already 5 after 9.
Yep.
I think that this issue of two issues, I think because I kind of glanced at this earlier and I had a lot of questions about the sliding scale and also the plan for supplementing teacher salaries, that as well. I think we need to get a lot more information about it and have that be a separate work session item for a day meeting. Why don't we hold off on that and move on to the other aspects of your presentation?
I'm more than happy to provide you with more detailed information, and I can also provide you with notes from the governance.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. Let's see. So do you want to talk about the salary schedule?
I think that's going to need a lot more information and
right.
as well.
No problem. Okay, so we'll talk about the quality improvement activity. So as I told you about last fall, we have 18 classrooms in the pipeline for Durham Pre-K. What that means is, I want to be clear, because evidently the use of the word pipeline has been somewhat misinterpreted, so we're probably going to change the name. The pipeline just means that you are invested as a child care provider. You have applied to be a part of it, to participate in quality improvement activities, intensive quality improvement activities. Those classrooms, we had over 30 classrooms apply to be in the pipeline. We selected 18 based on budget. Those classrooms are receiving weekly intensive TA, weekly coaching on instructional strategies, professional development, and those programs are participating in a community of practice, those teachers. So what that means is that those 18 classrooms are moving closer to being eligible to be selected to be Durham Pre-K site. Now, we have 5 classrooms that are about to be active. That was a separate application process that providers could apply for. We had 19 programs apply for 5 spaces, 5 classrooms. Those will start in March. Those will be a mix of some existing programs that are moving up in quality and some programs that are not currently publicly supported. So your investment in quality improvement means that those teachers are having an opportunity to work intensively on their instructional strategy.
And where will these classrooms be located?
I knew you were going to ask me where those classrooms are, but I can't tell you because we're in the process of notifying sites that they've been selected. And unfortunately, that didn't coincide with tonight. But you will get a notice this week outlining where those classrooms are. We had a rigorous RFA process where programs were scored through both their application as well as visited. They had class assessments in their classrooms, and they had monitoring visits. It was quite competitive, and we're very excited about the quality of those programs. Okay, what other questions do you have not related to the things we're deferring? Any?
Okay, questions?
I think it's those basic too.
I have one
Commissioner
question.
Basic too.
So I know there's a sliding scale within Durham Public Schools for pre-K.
Yes.
At least at Whitted. When you come back, can you compare their scale, sliding scale, to what you're proposing?
Yeah, we can do that. We did that for governance. We compared them, and what you'll find is that the Durham Public Schools sliding scale is much more generous than the one that we proposed for Durham Pre-K. So families will actually pay more based on their income in Durham Pre-K if this sliding scale remains.
So you mean the Durham Public Schools subsidizes people making $200,000 a year in pre-kindergarten?
Yes, they do.
It is.
Okay.
I know we're going to talk about
Commissioner
that. I
Carter.
know we're going to talk about that more later. First of all, I thought this was a great update, and you've made a lot of progress. I mean, so it really feels exciting to me that we're rolling forward.
Yes,
So congratulations and thank you.
thanks. I look forward to
And
clearing up your questions.
But,
yeah.
just one quick question. And maybe this will be for later. It sounds like it probably will. But
Okay.
I was interested in just hearing more about the compensation for TAs. So maybe we can talk about that later too.
Okay.
We'll get this on our March work session.
And just did you all consider, this could be for when you come back too, did the governance committee consider charging families at 500% of the federal poverty level a fee that would end up being greater than, when you collected that fee for the whole year, it would be greater than the $15,000, and then you could use that money to then subsidize? Anyway, that was sort of my question.
We did talk about that at length, and I'm happy to fill you in on that.
Okay.
In that information.
Sounds
I
good.
can provide you with some very detailed analysis of what the governance wrestled with. And obviously, as we move forward, you, as this body, will need to decide what decision-making governance will have versus what you expect.
Right. I think that's an important thing for us to grapple with.
What I will say is that the work of the governance, the decisions made by governance were grounded in what was recommended by the task force that met for almost a year in 2017. So to date, the governance has expanded upon those recommendations, but has not deviated from them.
Sounds
So
good.
Just
Yeah.
FYI.
Yeah, that would be great. We'd love to see all that. And Linda, in terms of the 18 that are in the pipeline, and then 5 actually being active in March, and then it looked like 13 more. are
Right, you
going
budgeted, you provided resources for 13 classrooms to open in August.
in August. So are we, in terms of that schedule, are we on schedule?
Yes.
For all that? Okay.
We are right now on schedule for all of our the full scope of work.
And how many kids will that be in those
There's 18, a cap of 18 children in each classroom.
18 times 18?
Now,
18
remember,
times 13.
our goal, remember the difference. Durham Pre-K is different than many communities. We are not creating a separate program. We are expanding upon what we have. So as the gentleman who was here earlier talking about Durham Tech, when he said last dollars, that's what you have in Durham Pre-K. Your resources are going into those classrooms at the end. We're pulling in other resources first. So you could potentially, in the fall, depending on how the classrooms fall out, you could be serving more children in the fall. It just depends on how those classrooms fall.
Okay, and have you begun any conversations with Durham Public Schools about their spaces and locations? And
We are working very closely with Durham Public Schools. We have quality improvement team members working with their staff to get their classrooms that are not licensed. Remember, this program requires the classrooms to be licensed. We also have been in communication talking with Durham Public Schools about our hope that they will make a commitment in the long run to having a preschool classroom, at least one or two, in every elementary school. That's our goal, and they have been open to talking about that.
fantastic.
They've not made any commitments, but they are working hard to expand their activities.
Right. And Commissioner Ratko?
So where are we in terms of filling the classes that we have?
Okay, so the classrooms that we have, are you referring to NC Pre-K? Okay, so in NC Pre-K, as you're aware, Durham's Partnership for Children manages that program through the state. The most recent report that I saw was from before the new year, but we've been told that they are very near capacity. When we send you information based on your questions, I'm happy to ask them to provide us with a report. But they were very pleased with their fill rate this year.
Okay, and
Remember, it's a moving target. You know, families do move and change, and sometimes you'll have vacancies.
that's good news. And how about Whitted School? Do you know about that?
We can also ask the school system to provide that report. We've been told that their enrollment is also up.
Good. And assuming the General Assembly continues on the track of providing more NC Pre-K dollars, have we started recruiting? And with us creating new classes, we're going to have to make a real big effort. Are we going to try to fill the NC Pre-K classes before we fill our classes? How will that work?
Okay, so remember, this program is building upon our existing program. So any spaces that come available from the state to expand NC Pre-K, Durham has committed to being ready to accept those spaces.
Right.
And if we get new NC Pre-K spaces, that means that our Durham Pre-K dollars will potentially go farther.
Right.
And so part of having a pipeline, a quality pipeline, Durham is different than Charlotte or Wake in that you're investing in quality improvements so that you have a readiness level for new classrooms.
Right. So really, I mean, we need to develop as big a wait list as we possibly.
Yes.
I've brought this up for 2 years in a row, but this year the stakes are really high for us. We really need to actively recruit. And I thought in your report you pointed out somewhere that we're only serving a relatively small portion of eligible children. And so we've got to remember
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, so there are 6 low-income preschool children for every one currently publicly funded preschool slot in Durham County. So we should be able to generate a really long wait list. These kids must be out there somewhere.
I agree
And,
with you,
you know,
but
working with the pediatrician offices and just a whole slew of places, we need to try harder, because I've seen in the past a correlation. For instance, the year Wake County had 2,000 plus kids on their wait list, which I think was 2 years ago, they got 500 funded slots, which was about 8 times or more what the number of slots we got. Now, I know they're 4 times bigger, but they're not 8 times.
They are bigger. So I just want to address one thing. So part of what you're investing in is additional resources to support outreach. And the reality is that the state has woefully underfunded the activities to engage families around pre as part of NC pre. But in addition, so you are investing in that, and I agree with you completely that we have to reach out and touch every family that has a child eligible. I do want to remind this body, though, that we have things going on in our community right now that are very, very off-putting to families. And right now, the enrollment for next year has already started, began on February 4th. And those of you who live in Durham know that we've had a recent traumatic input from ICE, and many of our families have been canceling appointments.
Wow.
And the reality is that there are many factors that go into a family's decision to enroll their child in a publicly supported program.
Linda, I'm
Not to make
so
excuses,
glad
but
that
reality.
I'm really glad that you just made a point of that, because that's what we're hearing just in the last few days. People
Yeah.
afraid to send their children to school, people afraid to leave the house,
Mhm.
and now people afraid to sign their children up for pre-K.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah, but we have a full appointment schedule with families coming in to bring their paperwork. And this morning, one parent that actually called, many people just don't show up, but one that actually called to cancel her appointment said that she was not leaving her apartment for any reason.
Can we
awful.
look at
Absolutely.
ways to enroll them where maybe they can stay in place? I just think we should use every possible
Yes.
mechanism, and not, that we don't allow this fear to impinge upon opportunities for these little ones next year. So let's be creative, and let's work with El Centro Hispano, where we
Yeah, we're
may
working
have-
very closely with a lot of partners.
Right.
EDCI, Book Harvest Variety, Durham Public Schools. You know,
Do you
there's
have-
all types of ways.
Would
of
you have the
reaching families.
staff to go to the houses?
We do not have the staff to do intensive home visiting. However, we are very tightly connected with a variety of groups, and we're trying to make sure we leverage everything that's going on in the community to reach families. Right now, it's an intensive flare-up of fear, and as that's hopefully calms down a little bit, we hope that we'll be able to work around it. But the reality is that for all families, regardless of your circumstance, enrolling in a public, just because it's there, does not mean that you're going to make the choice to enroll your child. And what we have to do is make sure that it's the best high-quality program, and that families are really engaged and excited about the programs, and that once their child enrolls, they have the best experience, so they will tell their friends and neighbors.
I just want to echo what Commissioner Reckow said. I think we have to look at who people trust, who people really trust, and look at those resources. We're lucky to have El Futuro, El Centro, a lot of other Church World Service. There's lots of other groups where people have relationships within their churches. I hope that you'll reach out to those people. Because we're just talking about signing forms. I mean, somebody can go into somebody's home and help them fill out the form, or if they can do it online even.
I do suggest piloting, maybe working. We have a great relationship with the
The clinic.
the Duke North Roxborough Pediatric Clinic, which is the largest of all the clinics in Durham. Actually, some of us are going to be reading out there, and we know one of the doctors there, Ellie Erickson. I'm going to talk to her because, maybe they could have enrollment forms, and when little ones are coming in for checkups at the age of 4, just getting them to maybe take them or work with them on it. I just think we've got to be creative.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
are, but we can provide you with some information about what's
All right.
going on with that.
That would be
other
great.
information.
Thank you so much, Linda, and all of your staff who's here tonight. Thank you so much for all of your work. Okay, the last item tonight, last but not least, is an update on our 2019 reappraisal. We have Teresa Hairston, who is our interim tax administrator, and also Ryan Vincent, who's been also helping with the revals.
Madam Chair, before they get started, you have 2 pieces of paper in front of you that's been laid there by the staff. One is the, I'm sorry, just one is the highlights. And, yeah, it looks like this, some red lettering in the center.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
It's, I think a few weeks ago we were here and we talked about the reappraisal, gave you some general broad information, and we're just here tonight to give you an update on where we are, just to let you know how things are going. And we're going to get right into it. I know you've had a long night, so we're not going to hold you here very long. So general reappraisal is required at least every 8 years. Durham County's last general reappraisal was in 2016, and it's basically a process where all properties are reset to its current market value. Again, as I said, this reappraisal is effective 1/1 of 2019. Didn't realize that wasn't changing. Okay. So as I was saying, the objective of reappraisal is to appraise all property at 100% of market value, and that's the most probable price that a property could sell for in an open and competitive market. In 2018, real property was approximately 82% of the total property types in Durham County. So basically, 82% of all taxable property was made up of residential, real property. 2% of that is public service companies, that's utilities, airlines, railroads, personal property, boats, motors, planes, those types of things, and registered vehicles is about 6%. Durham County has about 116,000 properties, and over the last 2.5 years, our staff, the tax staff, has gone out and visited every property in Durham County. So we've been very busy over the last 2.5 years. As part of current market value, we're looking at true value in money, and that's the definition. The official definition of that is the price estimated in terms of money at which a property would change hands between a willing and a financially able buyer and a willing seller. That is what we're looking for when we're out there and putting value on properties. We have looked at or qualified about 12,500 properties during this particular process. Of course, there were more transactions than that in the last 2 years, but that's what we have actually qualified, and what we've used when we set values for this general reappraisal. Those sales occurred between January of 17 and December 31st of 18. So we're talking about a 24-month period. 12,500 qualified sales. That's a lot of sales, and we've actually gone out and looked at all of those. We've sent out letters asking property owners or buyers or sellers what was included in the sale, so that we could actually determine whether or not it was a qualified sale or not. If you look at the map here, it shows the points or where those sales actually occurred. So we had a good representation throughout the county when we were looking at valuations. So the notices went out January 31st, and we've had an uptick in phone calls since we sent them out. Included in the change of value notices were brochures regarding what a general reappraisal is. We had a brochure of how to appeal your property. We talked about property tax relief programs, and we also included a buck slip, was what it's called. It's just a little, it's a buck slip, and that it has all the informational meetings. What we're doing is offering citizens or property owners the opportunity to come in and sit down with an appraiser for 15 minutes and talk about your property, so that you can understand the appeals process, and we can help you talk about it or help you decide whether or not you actually want to appeal your property value. When we talk about appealing your property value, we ask that the owners do a couple of things. We ask that they review their property on our website. Just go to our website. It's very simple. You can pull up your property, look at all the characteristics, make sure that we have everything correct. At this point, we have fielded about 844 data change requests. People that have actually gone online, because you can do it right online, and they've gone in, updated their bedrooms or their bathroom, anything that they feel is incorrect in the property characteristics. Once they are complete, once they've looked at the characteristics that we have on the property, we ask that they compare their tax value with actual sales of similar properties. We have an application right there on our website, makes it very easy to do. We actually, it even gives you the comparables for you to choose. So the only thing they need to do is just pick 3 comparables or however many they like, and take a look at it and see whether or not they feel like they could sell their property for that amount. By following those steps, then you can make a determination of whether or not you feel like you need to actually appeal your property or not. We actually ask that the property owners to file their appeal prior to March 15th. Of course, they have until May to actually file their appeal. Board of Equalization and Review adjourns May 3rd of 2019. However, we're asking that if you feel like you really need to appeal the property value, that you get that appeal in by March 15th. That gives us plenty of time to actually review those documents, get in contact with the property owners, perhaps make appointments to come out and visit their property again prior to that adjournment date of the Board of Equalization and Review. At this point, we are looking at an assessed value change of about 19.5%, and that's countywide. We're still doing some refinement of our numbers, and we will, of course, have tighter numbers as we go through the appeals process, as we qualify exempt properties. That, of course, can take some time. During the last general reappraisal, we had about 6,000 appeals, so we've got to work through those. And as I said, as we get closer to the budget time, we will have tighter numbers for you.
Teresa, how does that compare to our last revow? So our last one was, we hadn't done for 8 years, right? It was 2008 to 2016.
That's correct.
So over an 8-year period, what was the percentage?
So in 2016, it was about 14%. And let me also say that that number, that 19.5%, does not include the 3.5% growth that we typically calculate in. When you look at the past few years, there's been natural growth in those numbers of 2.5% to 3.5% annually. So that 19.5% that I'm talking about now does not include that 3.5% natural growth.
But we can't really compare to the 08, 16 span because it included the horrible recession, fall off in values, and then it leveled, and then we slowly built back up. But so as a result, I mean, we don't have a good.
And you are absolutely correct. These last 3 years have been very different. So it's kind of hard to capture that exact number. When we look at values now, we're looking at them as of 2016. So it's kind of hard to say what those actual numbers would have been. We're looking at 2019. So it's hard to say what the 2019 numbers would be using 2016 rates. So I don't know if you've got any more questions. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
I just want to clarify one thing, your last sentence, because as I remember it in the past, we have to be presented the revenue neutral rate.
And
I don't know, do we formally adopt it? I mean, it's part of the equation brought forward with the manager's recommended budget.
so it's required that you give a revenue neutral rate, not necessarily that it be adopted, but that one be included in the budget.
So it'll be presented to us because it is important that the public know what the steady state rate would be with the new calculation.
That is correct.
Which will be less than where we are now. Even with appeals, it should still probably be a lower rate than we are right now. But the bottom line is brought to us, and then we build on that.
Oh, glad you asked about that. I was confused by the wording.
Commissioner Carter.
Well, thank you so much for doing, what must be a arduous, hard job at this time of year and answering phone calls. I'm sure they're not all happy. And just taking on this role, thank you for doing that for us.
Absolutely.
I think you've done a great job.
The number of phone calls have actually decreased. I checked today, and it had gone down about 250 calls. So we received 250 calls less today than we did on the first day that they hit the mail. So
that's amazing. I did have one question. Remember what it was? Oh, I know. So when you're looking at properties and trying to find comparable properties to compare sale prices, does that mean properties that are comparable in size, and also in location? I mean, is location taken into consideration?
Absolutely. Location is taken into consideration, as well as size, condition of the property, the use of the property. So, of course, we can't compare an apartment building or a duplex to a regular residential home. So all of those type things are taken into account.
Commissioner Hill?
Sure. Another question about the comps. You can't actually get into the home, so let's say the home was built in 1973 and the home still has some nice orange shag carpet in one home, and another one has done a total revamp, and they've gone to hardwood and granite. I mean, but you wouldn't know that, would you?
We would not know that just by looking, because we do outside measurements.
Sure.
And we don't go into the homes unless the property owner asks us to come in, and it's not often that.
I'm sure that
they
happens
ask
all
us
the
to
time,
actually
yeah.
come into the home. However, building permits are issued. We have access to all of the building permits that are issued, so we know when there's renovations going on in property. To the extent of something like new carpet, which is not going to be a larger factor,
Sure.
that type of thing we would not know. But anytime that there's extensive renovations going on, we are aware of those.
So you would know about a new bathroom, but not new fixtures in the bathroom?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Commissioner Howerton?
One quick question regarding seniors. Are you seeing an uptick in seniors calling and asking questions about their property taxes going up so high?
We have not seen a huge increase, but we actually see that every year, so not necessarily more so this year than we have in the past. It seems as though every year we do have a lot of, or we have an increase, we've seemed to have had an increase in the number of elderly exemptions that we're fielding right now.
Okay, thank
So did you want to speak to this issue, or do you want to sign? Why don't we get you to sign up at the sheet with the clerk, and we'll do that in just a sec.
Thank you.
Teresa, related to the number of calls, I'm curious in terms of just compared to 2016, what is the call volume like? Do you have data on that?
Not exact data. I can say that the trend seems to be about the same. The first few days, the call volume is very heavy, and then it kind of levels off. Last general reappraisal, we held the informational meetings for a 4-week period instead of the 2-week period. And after about 2 weeks, it was, there were very few appointments.
And in terms of appeals, are you tracking the numbers compared to 3 years ago?
Not day for day. I can tell you that at this point we have about 589 appeals that have been filed.
And what was the total number in 2016?
The total number we had in 16 was just under 7,000.
Okay. And the schedule for the meetings, could you send to our clerk information that we can then include on our announcements? I want to make sure that we're including this information or any public information that you think people need to know. Some of the things you just said to us about the date, about these meetings, what people can do. If you could create some type of announcement that we can then put on our own announcement, like for our next meeting.
Okay, I will.
Include in our announcements. And also, these meetings here, just to clarify, people are, I think there's some confusion about what these are. This is not like just an information session. People will actually be meeting with people and helping them with whatever, if they want to file for
They would like to file an appeal.
an appeal or a tax relief program or anything that they need help with.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We will discuss the appraisal process. We'll go over their property characteristics with
Okay.
them, look at comps, and if they would like to fill out an appeal form right there, we will
Okay.
also help them do that as
Yeah.
well.
I think that's really important. You know, a lot of people aren't going to feel comfortable going online. People who are not familiar with using computers, you know, some of our seniors, and that I think it's important that this is an in-person opportunity for people to get that kind of help. Now, if it turns out that you've filled up all the slots, will you extend these meeting times?
Yes, we will.
Okay. Where are you looking, how is it looking right now with the appointments?
Right now, we've scheduled about 219 appointments and then 106 telephone appointments.
Okay, and what's the capacity for these, how many people how much room is left if you've done
I'm
200?
not sure exactly,
Yeah.
but what we can do, we're scheduling 4 appointments per
Okay,
hour.
yeah,
However, we can do more than that.
okay,
need
so you
to.
can add
We've
capacity
made a right.
if you need to.
That's
Okay,
correct.
great, okay, wonderful, thank you. Okay, we have one person signed up to speak on this issue, Harley Walker Jr. And please come up and just state your address, and thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, Commissioners, and thank you for informing me about this meeting so I could be here. My name is Harley Walker Jr. I live at 3427 Old Chapel Hill Road in Durham. That's very near the Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway intersection. Very busy intersection. I've been in the Durham area since 1990 when I moved down here from Virginia because my family was originally ancestored in North Carolina, so I wanted to come back here. I love Durham. I can't say enough to people I talk about how nice Durham is and how it's changed since I've been here. So getting to the tax appraisal, I bought my house back in 2003. It was a brand new house at that time. And I moved over from a condominium association in Breckenridge, and I reinvested the money that I sold that for into this new house. The money that I got was from my grandma, who left me some money when she died, and she told me not to spend it, but invest it because she didn't like to see me renting. So I bought myself a house so I could preserve that estate that she left me. Like I said, I bought it for $162,000 in 2003. My assessed rate back in 2014 is what the latest I could find on the Durham County tax site was $185,000. In 2016, it dropped to $177,000. Those current tax rates with the number 1 city of Durham municipality rate is 0.5786, and the county rate being 0.7779, with the total combined rate of 1.3565 tax rate applied to the assessed value. So this year I paid my taxes in full. It was about $2,400 on that $177,000. The notice that I got that you were speaking about, the appraised value now is $281,817, which is about a 60% increase in value on my property. At that same tax rate, that would be an increase of $1,419 to me personally each year. And that money is usually what I put in my HSA for my security and my future. I am a single person. I have no family. It's just me. So I'm scheduled for February 22nd at the Shannon Road Public Library, and I'm going to appeal this value. I've collected some properties near my house that have sold, and no house is sold for more than $250,000 in my neighborhood. And that's all I wanted to say. Well, just one thing. If people were aware that their appraised value might have a lower tax rate, it might not be a panic. But people don't know. And then with the March deadline before your budget meeting, I think in June,
it's kind of like, we don't know what to do at this point. And if there was a lower tax rate to go with this, $104,000 increase in my value, I might not have to appeal at all. But at this point, I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. And you're doing the right thing, which is making an appointment with the staff. And I do, we do encourage people to appeal and to do that as soon as possible and get the help that you need. Because as Teresa will tell you, she'll say to you that not everything is accurate. There are 115,000 parcels, and that's exactly why we have the appeals process, because not everything is correct. So please do go ahead and do that.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you. And Teresa, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I definitely agree with you, Chairman. We definitely would like for you to let us know. No one knows your home better than you do. So you have to tell us if we've missed something. We encourage you to please let us know because we want to make sure that it's right. That's what this is all about, making sure that we have accurate data, making sure that the property values are accurate so that the tax burden can be distributed equitably across all taxpayers.
Commissioner Echo.
So I would reiterate what was said and I wish you luck on your appeal. But I want to chime in, Teresa, because you've stepped into the hot seat here as interim, and I want to reiterate that I think you've done a tremendous job. And I actually had a meeting with the manager earlier today, and I told him that in all my years on the board, I thought to some degree this is definitely the calmest to date that I've seen in a rollout of a reval. So hopefully it'll stay that way. Obviously, there will be appeals and there are occasional mistakes and whatever, and all that has to get worked out. But in the scheme of things, I'm not seeing the tidal wave that I've experienced a couple of other revals. So
I'm glad to hear that. We got a great staff working very hard to get this, to finish this project. And so we're pulling together and making sure that it gets done, making sure that it gets done correctly. We want to make sure that it's correct.
And we want to extend that to you, Ryan, as well. Ryan Vincent, who's really done a lot of the outreach and public meetings and has really been there, the two of you as a team together. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right. I would like to, let's see, we don't have any items pulled from the consent agenda, so I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
second.
Moved by Commissioner Howard and seconded by Commissioner Reckow. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we're unanimously adjourned.